want to continue our conversation with retired California Superior Court Judge Ladoris Cordell and CNN national security analyst and former DHS Assistant Secretary Juliette Kayyem. Thank you to you both. Somehow this story, I think, was anticipated at some point, given how everything was unfolding in our nation. And Judge, I want to ask you about this because the indictment alleges that Judge Dugan escorted Flores Ruiz, quote, through a jury door to avoid his arrest. Is that an unusual step by a judge? What would you have done?
Well, thank you for having me on. What the judge did, in my view, was absolutely nothing illegal. And I would have done the same thing if I were in her place. And here's why I say that. The affidavit supporting her arrest says that ICE had an administrative warrant. And so an administrative warrant is not a warrant within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, because an ICE warrant is not supported by a showing of probable cause of a criminal offense. An ICE warrant is not issued by a court, a judge, or a magistrate. So an ICE warrant does not grant an immigration enforcement officer any special power to compel anybody in the courthouse to cooperate with a request. So when Judge Dugan, and she clearly in the affidavit said, you don't have a judicially issued warrant. This is an ICE warrant. She had no obligation to obey it, to abide it. She didn't obstruct or interfere with anybody. So
well, Judge,
it's
let me ask you,
unfortunate
excuse
that
me, Your
Pam
Honor,
Bondi.
I do want to.
Sure.
I want you to finish your point, but so if that's the case, right? She
Yes.
understands full, as you do, of course, the idea of having some matters litigated in front of a judge or discussed later on.
Right.
Would it have been more prudent? And again, these are all allegations, nothing is proven, but assuming the allegations are true, would it have been more judicially prudent for her to have argued this after the fact as opposed to ushering him to a different location?
So here's the problem with that. The courthouse and the courtrooms, in my view, they're sanctuaries in that everyone who is charged with a criminal offense is guaranteed due process. If she had gone along with the program and adhered to an administrative warrant that has no real legal enforcement, then there is no guarantee that that young man would have disappeared, would have been denied due process. There's plenty of examples of that under this administration. So no, absolutely not. She protested and said, this is not a judicial warrant, and she didn't have to follow it. So in my view, she didn't obstruct anything.
Juliette, let me bring you into this because obviously Mayor Johnson says the incident has a chilling effect on the judicial system. You have a law enforcement perspective, and I want to get into specifically what Judge Judge Cordell is talking about, this idea of the distinction between the administrative and a judicial warrant. Mm-hmm. Should that have been the consideration of this judge?
So from the affidavit, it's hard to tell what triggered her concern. I'm going to be honest here. The affidavit, taken as it is, would make you wonder, and there's just honestly would make you wonder what her behavior was like. That's fine. I mean, it's going to be litigated. The more important part of this, the reason why we should be concerned, is not whether the FBI or the DOJ is going to prove a case against her. She could very well be exonerated. It's the performative nature of everything that led up to that. You cannot treat today as just a case, because there are cases in which DOJ has gone after judges who have done things illegally and even helped unlawful immigrants. Those cases do exist. What the problem is, as we're showing here, is the arrest in the courtroom, the tweets, the performative aspects of it that are consistent with attacks on the law firms, Elon Musk putting pictures of judges. It's a performative hostility towards the rule of law.
Well, Juliette, on that point, on that point, though, if an arrest in a courthouse is performative, then do you agree that an ICE arrest in a courthouse is equally performative?
So there's two parts to this. So the ICE used to be, and so we have to remember, why are we at this moment? It's because the Trump administration always wants us to be at this moment. So there used to be areas that would be called, sensitive locations, normally hospitals, religious institutions, and schools, where there was just sort of a social contract that we're not going to do it there. In most instances, courthouses were divided in between the public space, because criminals sometimes are undocumented, as we know, and the space where justice is served, the courtroom. And that distinction is important because of what happened. Because you don't want judges sitting on cases where they have to deliver due process to be in the middle of whether this person should be deported or taken in by ICE. So the judge rightfully sort of knowing, Judge Dugan rightfully sort of knowing the rules, tries to find the chief judge of the court, the administrator of court conduct. That doesn't work out. And then the rest of the day unfolds. So whatever she did, I think, is the Trump administration put this front and center because they wanted the performance. They wanted the tweets.
Judge Cordell, on that point, I'm going to ask you, obviously there is a political backdrop from which both of you speak. And we obviously understand the context of El Salvador and a Maryland man being wrongfully deported, according to the administration, and this back and forth. But should this Milwaukee judge be taking that national consideration into context when she is deciding whether or not to allow the ICE agents to put this person into custody? Should that be the consideration?
So here's to answer your question. If any judge allows ICE with administrative warrants or not to come into the courthouse and to roam the courthouse halls, then any defendant it's a no-win for any defendant. So a defendant has to go to state court because if the defendant doesn't show up for the hearing, an arrest warrant's issued.
Right.
They have to go. But if they go and there's ICE walking around, then they're going to get picked up. So they would stay home. But then if they stay home, then they're violating a state court order to show up in court. You can't have it both ways. This is a no-win for defendants. It's a no-win for state court judges. They did this to embarrass the judge and to try to frighten other state court judges. And I say state court, I am waiting to see if ICE would dare march into a federal judge's courtroom to grab a defendant. It's not going to happen. They
Juliet,
are picking on the state court judges. In my view, it's just not going to happen.
Well, Juliet, on that point,
so
excuse me, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I always feel like the little prosecutor in me is like, oh no, I interrupted a judge. Excuse me, just now, Your Honor, give me 1 second. But Juliet, let me bring you into that point, because the obvious argument that the administration is raising is that, no, they're not trying to embarrass the judge, and no, they're not trying to chill a witness or a victim of a crime's desire to come forward. They are trying to ensure that those who should be here lawfully remain and those who are not are deported. Is that enough to tilt the balance or the scale in favor of having done this?
No, I mean, look, they always put up these false sort of choices. There's no Democrat, there's no law-abiding Democrat who would say they want unlawful immigrants who commit crimes to stick around this country. But we also have rules and laws called, and some of them are called due process, that we now know that the administration is defying. We know the American public is not happy about that, just based on recent polling. So the idea that it's either, get the guy and throw him into a van or let him roam free and kill a bunch of people, it's just, that's just a dichotomy that that the Trump administration wants people to believe, because they can't believe that there are law-abiding Democrats even who approve of the rule of law and also criminal prosecutions. That seems inconceivable to them. So at this stage, look, they wanted this, and so they're going to have to face it, in the sense that now they have to prove the case. And in the meanwhile, we ignore the performative nature of it because that's what they want.
Judge Cordell, Juliet, this is not the end of this discussion. Thank you both.
No. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.